Brilliant. Well, just a big warm welcome again to everybody. Welcome from me. If you're here as a visitor, it's your first time with us, we'll be special welcome. It is indeed time to open your Bible. So grab a Bible. If you've got your Bible, I'm a big fan of a paper Bible. If not, grab your phone, grab an app, grab what you can in front of you. It's just great to have an international focus on our day today. That is brilliant. There are some fantastic people dressed up. Muna looks wonderful. Greg Braithwaite looks wonderful. Danny looks particularly... Come on, Danny, you've got to stand up there. And there we go. Just shout out, what two countries are you blending in that particular outfit? Africa and Brazil. There we go. I have come today dressed as an Englishman. So there we go. It took me much preparation. I can see, I don't know how many South African rugby shirts have we got. There's 3 of them right there. South African green rugby shirts. Fantastic. Esther, please turn to the book of Esther in your Bible. If you're not sure where it is, you go right to the middle. You get the book of Psalms. Then you go back a bit and you get the book of Job. And then you go back one more and then you get the book of Esther. So head for Psalms and then go back a bit. We've got a lot to do in the next 30-ish minutes. So you know when someone leaves you a voice note, you can put it on double speed. Is that just me who does that? You say, oh, no. Or 1.5. Anyone else do that? Oh, it's just me confessing my sins. So it might feel that I want double speed today because I really do want to get lots through as we go. If you are a child of the 1950s, who was your hero? Was it Elvis Presley? Winston Churchill, maybe. Audrey Hepburn. Child of the 60s? Maybe Lennon and McCartney. Child of the 70s? David Bowie, maybe. Child of the 80s? Spice Girls. Hang on. Not the 80s, 90s. Oh, you're getting ahead of yourself. 80s, I think, is what, Madonna or someone like that. 90s. There we go. We all know. It does not surprise me that Joe Caputo loves the Spice Girls. Child of the 2000s. Lightning McQueen. Very good. Taste him. David Beckham. Someone like that, maybe. Child of the 2010s. Are you in the room? You're a child of the 2010s? You might be. Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, somebody like that. The hero of Esther, or rather the heroine of the book of Esther, is clearly Esther. Mordecai is also quite a hero. We are today not actually going to meet Esther quite yet. We're not going to meet Mordecai quite yet. We're not going to meet Haman, the slightly pantomime baddie of the book. We're only going to meet one of our main characters, and he would love to be considered a hero. This man we're going to see today would love to be considered a man of great importance and someone to follow. As we see, though, he is far from somebody to emulate, at least in this first chapter. And he's called Xerxes, King Xerxes. That is the focus of our first chapter of Esther that we're going to look at today. And it's just very moving hearing Sam and Yasser pray, and actually hearing Sam pray in Persian. My Persian's not hot. I think that was Persian, wasn't it? Yes. Well, the book of Esther, by just God's providence, today we're opening a book which is the only book of the Bible which is entirely focused in what is today Iran, Persia, the Persian Empire, which is something of God's providence, I think. Let's read just the first few verses, at least, of Esther chapter 1. Are we all there? This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa in Iran. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, wowza, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. The book of Esther is somewhat dominated by feasts and banquets and meals and parties. And actually in this first chapter, we're already going to see three 3 banquets. So actually, again, in God's providence, we're having our own banquet today, aren't we? Our own church banquet. I don't know if you hosted people over Christmas. That seems the dim and distant past, just a few weeks ago. Well, the book of Esther is all about hosting, and it's all about meals and banquets. And here we have the first one. King Xerxes throwing a party that we just read about on the screen here. He is the king of Persia. We're told he's in the ancient citadel of Susa. Susa is in what is today southern Iran. The action of the book of Esther is taking place about 60 years after the Jewish people were allowed to leave Babylon and go back to Jerusalem. For those of us last year, remember we looked at the book of Daniel and the 70 years of God's people being in Babylon. At the end of that 70 years, there's a new king, and actually there's a new empire, the Persian Empire. And Cyrus, who's the king of the Persians, says to all the different ethnicities in his kingdom, if you want to go back to your land, you can. He has a kind of a religious freedom policy. And some of the Jews decide to go back to Jerusalem, but most of them, like lots of second generation, third generation immigrants around the world today, decide, actually, we're going to stay here. We're okay here. And Daniel's set in Babylon. This book is set in Susa, just a little bit east, a couple of 100 miles east from Babylon. What a kingdom Xerxes has. It says that he reigns from India to Kush. Anyone been to Kush recently? Kush is Ethiopia or Sudan, so kind of Eastern Africa, and India actually is probably Pakistan today. So his kingdom goes from Iran down to Eastern Africa, all the way across to Pakistan and India. He's the most powerful man in the world. He's got the most power you could possibly have. Nobody in history up to this point has ever been as powerful as Xerxes. Actually, we said that last year when we talked about King Nebuchadnezzar. But the Persian Empire is even bigger than the Babylonian Empire. He is even more powerful than Nebuchadnezzar. If you think, Trump, Putin, Elon Musk, King Charles, add a few more, roll them into one, you get something like the power and the authority of this king we're looking at today. He reigned from 486 to 465 BC. And we're told he is, in verse 3, in his 3rd year of his reign. So therefore we know we are in 483 BC. And that means he's 35 years old, because we know when he was born as well. He's 35 years old. He's in his 3rd year. Other extra biblical sources tell us that he spent the first couple of years of his reign doing all sorts of building projects. So he's 3 years in, he's settling into his reign. He's settling into who he is as the king. And he decides to throw a party, a banquet. What's the biggest banquet you've ever been to? Just last week, I spoke to an Indian friend who'd been to a wedding last week, and she said there was 1,200 people at the wedding. That's quite a wedding, isn't it? I don't know if you've ever been to anything quite as big as that, but it's estimated that there's something like 15,000 people come to this banquet which Xerxes throws. Who's this banquet for? Verse 2, 3, it is for the military leaders, the nobles, the officials, the princes of all the provinces. Just imagine that. And how long does it go on for? Half a year, 6 months. That is quite a party, isn't it? 6 months of the great and the good of this vast empire, all assembling in Susa. Just imagine, you thought, cooking for the in-laws was difficult at Christmas. This is like thousands of people. Think of the accommodation, the transport, the flowers, the food, the wine. I mean, goodness me, this is enormous. And this book starts with this banquet. A book that's about a beautiful young Jewish woman being courageous, standing up for God. But the context is the opulence and extravagance of King Xerxes. That is banquet number 1. Verse 5. When these days were over, the end of the 6 months, the king gave, a banquet lasting 7 days. Pretty short by comparison. In the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people, from the least to the greatest, who were in the citadel of Susa. Let's just pause there. So we get banquet number 2. 4 weddings at a funeral. This is 3 banquets. We're going to have 3 at third in a minute. Second banquet, just a week long. The other one was 6 months for all the great, powerful people of the empire to come, presumably for Xerxes to show off and display his great splendor. Now we get one just for 1 week. Who's it for? It's for from the greatest to the least, verse 5 there, who were in the citadel of Susa. So it's for the people who live in the residential area of Susa. Certainly hundreds, again, possibly thousands. This is like the normal people. So they can come and see quite what happens in the palace, as it were. This is the illiterate, the poor, getting a chance to see. It's only 7 days, but it's no less luxurious, as we'll see. Verse 6. The garden, because it's taking place in the garden, had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. This is just his garden. Like, wow. What have you got in your garden? Bit of, B&Q furniture, the old apple tree maybe. Look at this is not too shabby, isn't it? We're told that there are massive white and purple curtains. Purple was the most difficult color to obtain in ancient times. It was the most expensive, the most difficult dye to obtain. It was only for the most affluent, the most wealthy. It's why, by the way, if you jump forward a few hundred years, you get to the book of Acts. Acts 16, we meet a woman called Lydia, who contributes to Paul's ministry, and she is a merchant of purple cloth, we're told. In other words, she had a bit of money, which is why she could support Paul. Purple was a display of wealth. Anyone wearing purple? I see. Oh, look at Kath in a purple today. So nowadays, we would wear a label. We'd have Armani or Gucci or Versace, Nike. Look, I've got my Nike shoes. Xerxes doesn't need a label. He just has purple curtains. Just look how rich and extravagant I am. These local people are coming in and they see purple. Well, we don't have that in our house. Wow, look at his purple curtains. And they come in and they see this enormous palace grounds. And the purple are attached with silver rings on marble pillars. There are couches of gold and silver. Doesn't sound very comfortable, does it? A gold sofa, but it's pretty impressive. And there's all these jewels. Porphyry, that's a precious crystal. Guess what color porphyry is, by the way? It's purple. Marble, mother of pearl, other costly stones. Just like this pavement of jewels that you're meant to walk over. Quite extraordinary, isn't it? The wealth that's going on here. Verse 7. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other. And the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. He's got gold cups. We get our cups, our wine glasses from IKEA. And you buy 20, so that if they smash it, doesn't matter, because you can go and buy exactly the same one. This guy's got hundreds, maybe thousands of gold goblets, all of whom are different. Each one is different. And the wine is flowing. Royal wine, not any old wine. By the king's command, verse 8, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way. For the king instructed all the wine stewards, you're doing well when you got wine stewards, don't you? Instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. So there's a drinking rule. And the rule is, there's no rules. You can drink whatever you want. There's no limits, there's no boundaries, there's no inhibitions. The stewards are told to serve each man, this is probably just men, each man what he wished. Hundreds, possibly thousands of men have an open bar for a week. This is a happy hour for 1 week. What could go wrong? That's banquet number 2. Verse 9. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. A third banquet. So first we get this long 6-month one All the sort of nobles and princes will come and spend 6 months, all the sort of luxury hospitality of the king. And then there's a week's one, just for people who live in the city, probably to sort of thank them, maybe, for hosting all these people. And then we hear of a third banquet that the queen hosts. So we got another character in this story, Queen Vashti. She gives a banquet. Was it also a time of excessive drinking, outlandish luxury, or was it a more dignified, sober affair? We don't know, but we could probably guess. We're told she gives a banquet. Where's the banquet? In the palace. Whose palace is it? The palace of Xerxes. This is all, let's not forget who's in charge. Let's not forget who's the boss in this opening chapter. The most powerful man in the world, who always gets his way. Well, nearly always. Let's read the next bit. Verse 10. On the 7th day, so the end of the week of the second banquet, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, practice this week, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zitha, and Carcass, some great names, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. So on the 7th day, the end of the week of drinking, a drunk Xerxes asks his servants, all of whom are named there, to fetch the queen and get her to parade in front of all the other men, wearing a royal crown. Wearing only a royal crown? Don't know. Maybe. I won't ask ladies to ask how you would respond to this. Let's see how Vashti responds. Verse 12. But. This is a guy, Xerxes, who is not used to sentences starting with but when he's around. He gets his own way all the time. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Get my wife to come and parade amongst all the drunk guys, please. And not surprisingly, Vashti says, no, I'm not too keen on that. No, thank you. Vashti is a bit of a kind of foil to Esther in some ways. Later on in the book, Esther will come into the presence of the king when she's not been invited, at great risk. Here, though, Vashti refuses to come into the presence of the king when she has been invited, at great personal risk. And Vashti's response infuriates Xerxes. Of course it does. He's that type of guy. He's that guy who gets infuriated when his wife says no to whatever he wants to do. And in a culture when honor is everything, Xerxes, he's been humiliated. He's just spent 6 months showing off, saying, asserting his great authority and luxury, establishing he's the boss, he's in control, and then in one moment, the bubble is popped, and he's been shamed. He gives the impression he could do whatever he wants, but actually it's proven not the case. Should we see how he responds? Verse 13. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, not sure this is really a matter of law and justice, is it? But anyway, he spoke with the wise men, of course he did, who understood the times. Did they understand women, though? Who understood the times and were closest to the king. Karshina, Shitha, Admatha, Tarshish, Merez, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had special access to the king, and they were highest in the kingdom. It's just worth underlining that phrase, special access to the king. That's going to be one of the main themes of the book, having access to the king. And the writer just introduces this theme of access to the king. He's introduced the theme of laws. Xerxes just made a law that you can drink whatever you want. He's going to make another law in a minute. He's introduced the theme of feasts and banquets. That's going to be a theme that runs through the book. He introduces here the theme of access to the king. This writer knows exactly what he's doing. Verse 15 says, according to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? She hasn't obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king. So one of them speaks up, and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and peoples of the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she wouldn't come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. So one of these seven is like Snow White and his seven dwarfs. It's Xerxes and his seven nobles. One of them pops up and says, oh, this is terrible. How outrageous. Women across the nation will refuse to obey their husband. They will, terrible. We better do something. Therefore, if it pleases the king, because let's face it, that's what matters most, let him issue a royal decree. We've had a royal throne, a royal palace, royal wine, a royal crown. Now it's a royal decree. And let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. And let the king give her position to someone else who is better than she. That's a cruel thing to say, isn't it? Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice. So the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, this vast kingdom, to each province in its own script and to each people in its own language, proclaiming in each people's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. What do we think of that? Just remind us, this is descriptive of what happened. This isn't saying this is what should happen in our lives. This is simply describing what happened at this point in this pagan court. Memucan makes a proposal, a couple of laws to make. The first one is like a personal law regarding Vashti. And the second one is a kind of general law across the whole nation. The one against Vashti, she is never again to enter the presence of the king. I wonder how upset she was. Isn't that just what she's refused to do? It's like saying to a kid, bad kid, you have done bad. Here's ice cream. Like you're not allowed into the presence of the king ever again. She's not killed, as far as we know. But she is exiled from the court. She's fired from her role as queen. And we don't hear from her again. She's just not the main character of the book. This is setting us up for Esther to come along. As said last week, that courage is one of the great themes of the book of Esther. And it is. And Esther is so courageous. And Mordecai is courageous. Can we just wave a flag for Vashti here? She's pretty courageous, isn't she? She says no to this bully of a husband. I think, good on her. Well done, Vashti. So we get a rule regarding Vashti, and then we get a rule regarding all the women of the whole kingdom. Because that's a really good way to control people, isn't it? Just make a law. A law is sent out, verse 21, verse 22, around the whole kingdom that every man should be ruler of his own household. And this rule is sent out at great cost and great effort. Dispatches sent across this vast kingdom, all the different languages, all the people groups, all because Vashti said no to her bully of a husband. Probably could even say her abusive husband. So that's where we are as we come to the end of chapter 1. We've been introduced to Xerxes, this deeply powerful man, this arrogant man, showing off his luxury. His honor is maybe saved. Vashti is banished. We don't hear from her again. And the door is now open for Esther to come into the court of Persia. And we'll meet her next week. It's quite a chapter, isn't it? If that was your devotional Bible reading this morning, I hope you had a good time with the Lord. What do we learn from this opening chapter? The chapter, as I say, sets us up for Esther, But the focus is very much on Xerxes, the way he relates to people, the way he relates in particular to his wife. And with like the eyes of, or the glasses of the New Testament, we know that there is a much better king coming who does not treat us like Xerxes treats people. Just a few minutes ago, I just want to draw 3 things about the way Xerxes behaves, which I would suggest we do well to make the right choice. Few principles just to draw out. Demanding versus deserving. By that I mean Xerxes demands respect without being worthy of respect. Ever know anyone like that? Did you have a school teacher at school? Not in this school, obviously. Did you have a school teacher in school who would come in and shout and scream and I'm in charge, I must be disciplined. But you knew he didn't really care about you. Maybe your old boss, maybe your current boss, has the title of CEO, manager, director. But they're the last to come in the office. They're the first to leave. They don't know the name of your kids. They don't really care who you are. Xerxes is a bit like that. He expects respect without being worthy of respect. The New Testament, when talking about church leaders, says they are to be worthy of respect. 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul writes, whoever aspires to be an overseer, a leader, an elder, desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. Not sure we'd be recommending Xerxes for church leadership very soon. A couple of verses on, in the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect. The call for all of us, men and women, is not to demand respect, but to be worthy of respect, to live lives that are worthy of respect. And of course, Jesus came and he lived a life not just worthy of respect, but worthy of honor, worthy of worship. We follow a much better king than Xerxes. Oh no, they're all up there, aren't they? Sorry. Secondly, showing off versus serving. Xerxes is a complete show-off. Did you ever know anyone like that? A kid in the school play who shows off. The kid on the playing field with his white boots or his pink football boots, just a little bit better than everyone else. Tries a bicycle kick every time. This second banquet is over the top, extravagant, opulent, luxurious. It must have been overwhelming for these local people. The fishermen, the market stall holders, the tradesmen, the cloth makers. Did you notice where the banquet takes place? Happens in the enclosed garden of the palace. It's normally shut off. The riffraff can't get in there. It's a bit like when you go to Blaydon and you sort of look over the wall at Blenheim Palace and think, oh, wow. Or Buckingham Palace. Has anyone ever been invited to a garden party at Buckingham Palace? The only privileged person, Julie. The rest of us riffraff would sort of look over I wonder what it's like in there. The complete show-off sort of opens his enclosed, normally private garden. Says, why don't you come in here? See my purple curtains, my gold cups, my gold sofas. How different that is from Jesus, who said, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. First shall be last, the last shall be first. Jesus was never a show-off. He was a servant. He had power, Jesus. And the book of Esther, in many ways, is a study of power. How do we handle power? How do men handle power, particularly towards women? How do women handle power? Esther is a woman of power in the end. And we're shown a terrible example of how men should handle the power they get. Jesus had the most power possible. He was the divine God. And he gave it up so he could serve. In his power, he chose servanthood. Maybe that's the most profound way that any of us could use power. Demanding versus deserving. Showing off versus serving. One final one. Possessing versus partnering. What is your favorite possession? Your computer? Your iPad? Your iPhone? A family heirloom, been handed down as some jewelry, furniture, a book, a painting, your car. As humans, we love stuff, don't we? We love cluttering our lives with stuff. Xerxes was absolutely no different. He was a man who loved his possessions. And crucially, he clearly viewed Vashti as his possession. He viewed her as somebody he owned. We see that if you look at, if you've got it in front of you, verse 11, he says, to bring before Queen Vashti wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty. He wants to display her. Verse 4, we'd already read, for full 180 days, Xerxes displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom. That he has shown off his throne, his palace, his purple cups, his curtain, his royal wine. The next logical possession to display is his wife. The end of the week, the culmination of these celebrations, bring out my most prized possession. He views people as possessions rather than partners. We wouldn't do that, would we? We wouldn't view people around us as something that we can get out of them, somebody that we could use for our own benefit, rather than partners. Seeing his wife as his possession is particularly troubling, and let's be totally clear, deeply unbiblical. At no point in the scriptures are men encouraged to see their wives as their possession, or are wives encouraged to see their men as their possession. The question we could ask is, did Vashti do the right thing? She didn't obey her husband. Wives are meant to obey their husbands, aren't they? Submit to their husbands. Yesterday there was this news story, you might have seen it. A woman who won a £4.5 million house, anyone see this? Has joked the prize shows why she should never listen to her husband. Nicola Dickinson from Wiltshire said her husband Martin had told her to stop entering a prize draw for expensive homes as she would never win in a million years. The couple are now celebrating after bagging a Lake District home with a lake, woodland jet, sauna, hot tub and gym. Nicola, 59, said, I've been entering for 4 years. Martin has been moaning at me to stop. Poor old Martin. But I liked that even if I didn't win, I was supporting amazing charities. But winning has shown this is precisely why I never listened to him. And thank goodness I didn't. We're multi-millionaires now. That's a funny story. But did Vashti do the right thing? Yeah, you bet she did the right thing. Of course she did. If our partner asks us to do something degrading, immoral, ungodly, if we're in a position to be able to say no, then no is probably the right answer. He wants to objectify his wife, show off his possession. It's actually a little bit similar to the story of Joseph. If you think of Joseph, those of us who know that story, his Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him and he says no to her and he reaps the consequences, being thrown in prison and being exiled, a little bit like Vashti. The fundamental understanding of Christian marriage is set before us in just the second chapter of the Bible. Let's just read this single verse. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. It's one flesh rather than possessions. This one flesh verse gives us the foundational understanding of Christian marriage. It's between a man and a wife. Not a man and a man, a woman and a woman. It's between a man and a wife. Talking about the biblical understanding. It's linked to, but separate from the previous generation. A couple get married, there is a breaking from the previous generation, and there's a new family unit that's created. It's exclusive. You're united. No one else is involved. And it's equal. One flesh speaks of equality. Speaks of closeness physically and sexually, but it also speaks of equality. Men and women don't possess each other, lording it over the other one. There is an equality in marriage, which the one flesh language speaks of. Xerxes has clearly not read Genesis 2. Jesus did, and he quoted it. The Apostle Paul did, and he quoted it and reaffirmed it as well. If we see our spouse as our possession, then we treat them how we want to. What do we get out of this? If we see them as partners, then we see that we're in this together. We're one flesh. There's a unity, an exclusivity, an equality in values. He certainly hadn't had the chance to be fair, Ephesians chapter 6. When Paul says, husbands, you need to lay down your lives for your wives. The complete opposite of how he behaved towards his wife. We need to finish. That is Esther chapter 1. That is the beginning of our study of the book of Esther. As I say, it sets us up to next week, sets us up to meet Esther and her cousin Mordecai and Haman as well. I just want to finish a couple of small applications. If you've ever known a Xerxes, a spouse, a partner, a boss, a parent, please know that there is a much greater king than him, who will never treat you like Xerxes may have treated you. There is a much superior king who sits on a throne of grace that we can always enter into. Don't come fear and trembling. It's not for just an exclusive bunch. All of us have access to a throne, and on it sits a king way better than Xerxes. If you have ever known a Xerxes, please see the other king who's much better. Secondly, I wonder if there's a bit of Xerxes in any of us. Or maybe, to be more blunt, there is a bit of Xerxes in all of us. Because we're humans. Well, let's approach that throne of grace for forgiveness, if we need forgiveness, in the way we treat people, the way we view people. If any of those little pairs of words speak to you this morning, just respond to them in your heart. Let's make sure we're living lives completely worthy of respect, not demanding it. Let's make sure we choose servanthood rather than showing off. Let's make sure we view people not as possessions to be taken advantage of, but partnering. If he had repented, Xerxes, at verse 10 or 11, that would have been it. End of the book of Esther, shortest book in the Bible. If he'd asked for forgiveness, finished, done. If any of us need to ask God for forgiveness, it can always be an end of a story and a beginning of a new story. We're going to come to an end very soon, and we're going to have our own feast, our own banquet, but just want to give us a moment to respond to the Lord Jesus in worship. If anything I've said has kind of triggered anything, I'd just ask you to come to the throne of grace. These Persian people, much like the Iranian people today, they needed a better king. A king who served rather than showed off, a king who lived in simplicity rather than flaunted wealth. Oh, he's available and he's ready for us. Should we stand together? Let's approach Jesus, the great King. Let's receive his beautiful, kind leadership. And if we need to, let's receive a fresh forgiveness for anything we need to.